You're listening to Linked AM. Tell your story on Linked Live and get noticed. You're listening to Karl Woolfenden on the Business Class Show and is not always affiliated with the guests and the topics discussed. Any financial statements are the opinions of the individual, and you should seek professional advice before making any decisions. Upgrade your listening to Business Class, the show that puts you in the big leather comfy seats. So sit back and enjoy our take on the trending business issues of the week.
Howdy, folks. Here he is, the Texas Brit, the guy with the stiff upper lip, filling his 10-gallon hat and his cowboy boots, Karl Woolfenden.
Good morning, and welcome to Linked AM here on Business Class News. And it's me, Karl, again. And it's getting busy out there. You know, I actually was on the roads the other day, and I saw more than 10 cars, so it was interesting. And of course, people are getting out and about, and hopefully this new normal. I keep saying it. I should have hashtag new normal. I bet it's out there. A few days ago, I had a great conversation with my friends at Lathrop GPM, Mara Kohara and Eric Swan, and we touched on the civil lawsuits that may come out, tort law, etc., based on employees going back to work and also customers walking through the doors, etc., and the things you need to do, and planning came into the conversation. And then out of that conversation came, business interruption insurance that's being talked about. I mean, I don't think I'd ever heard of business interruption insurance as much as I did the past few weeks, as I've done. So they said that I really need to talk to a young lady called Alex Roje, who is a specialist in the insurance field over at Lathrop GPM. And so I've got Alex here in the studio, our virtual studio. Hello, Alex.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Karl.
It's great to have you on. And it's strange times we're in, isn't it? It really is. We hear it on the news all the time. And, it's... worrying for some business owners, and I thought this would be a great conversation for the readers, viewers, and listeners out there. So more and more businesses are saying to me, actually, I'm being declined my business interruption, even though I thought I was covered. So can you give us a little bit more information about what is that? What is business interruption insurance? And, what are the things happening out there at the moment?
Sure. So business interruption is typically part of your property policy. So for the typical person, your homeowner's policy, for example, will cover you if a fire burns down your house, a hurricane comes through, or a tornado, or some kind of natural disaster occurs. That's how we typically think of property coverage. But in the business context, there's an additional coverage that goes with it, which is business interruption. So if in your typical situation, imagine, for example, the last hurricane season, hurricanes come through, they destroy property. And as a result of that, the businesses, they're not just worried about rebuilding their store or their building or replacing the damaged property, but they're out of business for a while. And it could be a long while until things are put back in place and get back to normal, and they can continue to operate as they did before. So that's what the business interruption is there for. There are add-on coverages to that as well. You can, as part of the business interruption coverage, and sometimes it's referred to as business income, sometimes it's referred to as business interruption, sometimes it's called time element. As part of that, you would get your loss of income, for example, your income less expenses that you earned, for example, last year, right? And then what you would have earned this year based on that. for a certain period of time. Usually it's about 12 months from the date of the original loss. And then there are additional coverages like civil authority. Some folks might have heard of, which is and this may sound familiar, if the government comes in and says you have to shut down and says that you can't operate or somehow restricts access to your business, you can get coverage for, usually it's 30 days following that order. Or perhaps it's not your business that's been harmed, but perhaps it is someone in your supply chain.
Yes.
If you rely on a particular vendor to provide you, for example, let's say in the restaurant industry, perhaps you have a particular purveyor of poultry, for example, and then that business goes down, and for a certain amount of time you're out of luck, and you got to find a replacement for that vendor.
Mushrooms. With local Chinese restaurant, they didn't have mushroom chicken. So, but I know what you're saying.
Oh my goodness!
I never even thought of that. You've got to think about the things that are out of your control, but you've got to be covered. You've got to have that in the plan, don't you? You have to make sure.
You really do.
Yeah.
And another good example is, for example, let's say I use this example quite a lot. Let's say you have a hotel or a motel right next to Disneyland. And there's nothing wrong with your motel, but Disneyland shuts down.
Yeah.
And so you're out of business, basically, because no one's coming to a little motel in Anaheim for their family vacation. They're going to Disneyland. So there's coverage for that. There's various different coverages available. Those are the ones that are typically at issue right now.
So what should a business owner start thinking about when they're starting to put a plan together? I mean, you've got to think of all these things that you've just said, but what are the things that they should be thinking about to put their plan together, would you say?
Well, they should really talk to their broker about that. Insurance brokers, that's their job. Their profession is to procure coverage that will suit your needs. But I think for a business owner, depending on their business, I think they really need to think about what keeps them up at night. What is it that they're really worried about?
Yep.
Okay. What are the sorts of things that you think, my goodness, if that happens to me, I'm in real trouble. Once you kind of understand what your worst case scenarios are and what I call it the sleep at night coverage, go to your broker, sit down with them and talk to them and see what's available out there in the market. I think for small businesses, the calculus tends to be, unfortunately, they'll get some quotes from their broker and they'll always, what's the one factor they're going to consider? Price, right? Whoever has the lowest premium, and this is like for your individual car insurance or home insurance, right. You're going to say, you're not concerned about the terms and conditions as much as you are, just give me the cheapest one, right? Well, sometimes that's fine, but sometimes, you might have bought yourself the Pinto version as opposed to the Ferrari version,
yes.
Right?
Yep.
And I think when something like this happens, like this pandemic, it really shines a light on that. Because the coverages vary, and you can purchase, various different types of coverages, various levels of coverage, with various deductibles, with various sublimits. And so it really is, you really, I think, need to figure out, particularly if you're a small business, what is it that what do you need to make sure that you are not out of business if something happens? What is that one thing? Because I think a lot of people right now, as you said, they're making claims and they're saying, look, my business, clearly, if this isn't business interruption, I don't know what is, right? And then they're getting a denial from their carrier and they can't believe it. They don't understand. And I think a lot of that is because nobody, they never really thought about it until now. and perhaps they just went with an agent and they never really sat down and did some real planning around insurance. And frankly, they may not really understand what they're buying. I mean, they've got a lot on their plate.
Yep.
There's a lot, if you're a small business, you're working perhaps, 18 hours a day, you've got a lot on your plate. But, this may be the ultimate lesson, unfortunately, that we really need to think about these things and not just sort of go with, what's the cheapest product out there.
Yeah, I think the one of the things that we've seen, and we talk about even way before. I mean, when we started the show 4 or 5 years ago, we were talking about, look, we're all busy. We're all doing the things we love because we're entrepreneurs, we're business people. But the things that are not your specialist area, bring somebody in, bring an expert in, and really go through it. Because, if people have got a small business and they've already got a policy, then they need to go and look at that policy, don't they? Now, even before, because a lot of people haven't just completely shut down, but they potentially could have loss of income. So a lot of restaurants, for example, they're now saying, well, you've got to have 25% capacity. Well, is that enough money to pay the staff, the cooks, and everything like that, to keep and pay the rent, etc.? Does their existing policy cover that as such?
Right.
I mean, what can an existing business do if they've got a policy? I mean, should they pick up the phone to somebody like yourself over at Lathrop GPM and say, hey, can you really work through this, or do they need to go to the broker? What's the best way? I mean, is it good?
Well, I mean, it's right now. You can call us. You can call if you have a broker that you trust, as opposed to, be careful, because there are insurance agents out there that really are representatives of the insurer, and then there are insurance brokers that arrange for insurance, but they represent the policyholder. And they have a real professional duty to the policyholder to procure whatever insurance the policyholder has told them to procure.
Yep.
So, just like a lawyer has a responsibility to perform services, in a reasonable way, so does a broker. And so you want to make sure that you're going to a professional and not just a mouthpiece for the insurance companies.
Yep.
Who's just selling products as opposed to really sitting down and working with you. And you want your broker to really be part of your team, to be part of your business team, someone that you can call, someone that you feel comfortable with, someone that you can rely on. And that may not be your brother-in-law who just got,
Right. Yeah,
right?
It happens. It does.
Right? No, it does. And I think we're all guilty of that. But, as I say, I think this might be the ultimate lesson. Now, there are some things that you can't purchase, that they're just not, or they're so expensive that it's just going to be out of the question. But my view is knowledge is power. If you go into something knowing that you're not covered for this or you're not covered for that, you can take perhaps other steps to help protect yourself. But not knowing and thinking that you have insurance that you may not actually have, that's really not where you want to be. And unfortunately, I think a lot of particularly small business policyholders are finding themselves in that position right now. So, one of the issues that we're seeing is that the insurers, I think I really want to emphasize this to the audience, which is that these are not typical times, right?
Right.
This is not a typical loss. Even if you have a huge hurricane that comes through, like a Hurricane Katrina, or, what we saw, last year in Texas and Florida, they may be large losses, but they're localized,
yes.
Right?
Yep.
So this is a loss that potentially touches every single policy out there.
Yep. Yep.
And one of the kind of sayings I always tell my clients is, the bigger the loss, the more likely you're going to get a fight.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So to that point, so how let's put it in a scenario. So how do you help your client? I mean, so when somebody's been declined, does somebody come to you and say, "Please, can you help me?" Or how does that work?
Well, usually I would like to get involved when the claim is made.
Right.
Okay. Making a claim under a policy, people get intimidated by that. It's not a big deal. Sometimes it's just an email saying, I want to make a claim under my policy for COVID-19 losses.
Right.
Or you can direct your broker and call up your broker and say, make a claim, and they'll do it for you. It's not a big deal. The issue though comes in, you're going to get questions from the carrier. And the way you respond to those questions, can be very important, right? I don't want to say trap, but they can be a trap.
Right.
And for example, right now what we're seeing is the first questions you'll get back from the carrier is, okay, has anyone at your business been diagnosed with COVID-19?
Okay.
And you think, well, that's easy. That's a yes or no question. Well, but it could be a trap, because the issue here that policyholders are saying is, first and foremost, is there an actual physical loss?
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
Because when we started out talking about, for example, a tornado or a hurricane, it's obvious, right? Tornado comes through, destroys your building, you're out of business for a while.
Yep.
But where's the physical loss with a virus, right? And so you want to be very careful the way you respond to those questions. And what I've been telling my clients is, look, we don't know. And it's impossible to know because of the lack of testing, because of just the way things have progressed.
Yep.
Whether anyone is actually infected, right? But likely, if you're in a metro area, for example, somebody who had the virus probably came into your business.
Right.
At some point.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll never be able to know because we can't test. So, it's very important that you respond to these questions thoughtfully when they come in from the insurer, and don't just assume that they're easy yes or no questions.
Well, the thing is that I'm hoping that on these forms it actually has other, and then you can put an explanation. Because if it's yes or no, that's what sometimes it stumps me on some of these official forms where you go, okay, well, I've got a yes or no, but that isn't, as you say, a definitive answer. So how do you handle that? Do you go back and say, well, I can't answer yes or no, I need to put an explanation? Or is that form fixed in stone? I mean, I think a lot of people...
It is not. It is absolutely not.
Okay.
It's not set in stone at all. And that's where I think you need some advice.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't, you don't have to spend a fortune, but you just need someone who knows what they're doing. And unfortunately, a lot of lawyers and other representatives, consultants, and so on, who really don't know much about insurance, are kind of stepping in and trying to, get some new business out of this. And so I would really caution you that you go to someone, whether it's your broker or a lawyer, who really understands insurance.
Yes.
It's like you wouldn't go to a cardiologist if you had a stomach ache, right? It's the same thing. Even though your cardiologist might have some good advice for you, it's still, you want to go to someone who specializes in the topic.
Oh, I think that's great advice. And the thing is, it's better to spend some money on getting great advice than getting no advice and then getting zero result at the other end, or have a potential of having zero at the other end. I mean, we can't say that they wouldn't, but what I'm saying is that what your advice is fantastic. And the thing, what I like about, because when I was talking to Amara and Eric a few days ago, what I really like, because they were framing out what Lathrop GPM is all about. It's a group of specialists that really understand various parts of somebody's either life or business life, etc., and areas. And so they can go to you and really sort of say, okay, this is an insurance question, or they can go over to tort law, which is Mara and Eric. So you've got like a collection of specialists that are all at the end of a phone or in the office.
And now, particularly for maybe you're having an issue with your stimulus funds.
Yep.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Maybe you're having an issue. Who knows what the issue is? Maybe you're having a tax issue related to all this. Who knows? But it's extremely important that, you're not just going to your sort of general, your friend, like I said, your brother-in-law or so-and-so, someone who, just because they have a law degree doesn't mean they're the right person to be talking to. I would never, for example, advise someone on employment issues. I mean, that's not, it's just not something I would do.
Yep.
So yeah, it's extremely important. But in the insurance context, I think even more important than that is before anything happens.
Yeah.
Again, like we started out saying, sit down with particularly a broker, someone that has experience, someone that understands these issues, someone that is not just an agent, and that you can really sit down, go to their office, sit down with them, tell them about your business, make them a partner with you. They're essentially your risk manager, right?
Yeah.
If you're a small business, Fortune 500 companies pay people a lot of money to worry about risk. Small businesses typically don't have that luxury. So, use your brokers at the outset so that you're not, trying to catch up later. That you'd rather be sitting down with your broker for free.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Than having to pay a lawyer later.
I mean, absolutely. The thing that we've always, again, a lot of these things we're talking about in this unusual circumstances are things that we've touched on in shows, when we first started. And you're saying, look, when you're a small business, you've got to surround yourself with specialists, people that you can call upon to bring in and ask advice. I mean, we talk about having a great advisory board if you're a medium-sized business, because at the end of the day, you want to be able to have that resource, and planning is huge. If you can plan ahead of time, and as you say, small businesses sometimes don't have the time or the knowledge of what they need to be putting in place. But this is why I started Linked AM and Business Class News, to educate people, because there's nothing worse than having a problem and, as you say, having to try and fix it afterwards. I'd rather have everything up front, sort of at least prepared for it. And so,
right. Yeah. The problem too is, and I think, unfortunately, having been fighting insurers for 20 years, I can tell you that, unlike a large business, if you're, Boeing, okay, you have the wherewithal to fight, right? If you need to you're not going to get pushed around. You've got lawyers in-house. You've got the best law firms that can help you. But if you're a smaller business, and by the way, I don't mean just a mom and pop. If you're talking about less than 200 employees,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
That still could be a relatively large
I'm glad
business.
you said that, because a lot of people get fixated with small businesses being just the local retail shop. It's not. You're right. Small, medium, large. It's the wrong way to say it. It's really the amount of employees and revenue. Yeah.
Right. If you've got less than 200 employees, I'm putting you in the small business category, because compared to a Fortune 500 company, you are a small business.
Yep.
So, small businesses, though, they don't have, a tremendous amount of cash on hand. Okay. They don't have reserves, surpluses, all of that. They're not publicly traded. They can't, draw on that to help them. They don't have an in-house legal department or risk managers.
Yep.
And really, time is of the essence. And I hate to say it, but in my experience, I think insurers understand that. And denying a claim to Boeing is very different than denying a claim to a smaller business, because the smaller business, is much more likely to say, "Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to fight this in the courts. I'm going to have to get a lawyer. How am I going to fund that litigation?" How am I gonna? I don't have the wherewithal. In the meantime, my business is going under, and I need to dedicate all of my time to that. I can't. I don't even have the bandwidth to deal with it. And so that's why planning is so important. And I think right now, for example, there are a lot of small businesses that have gotten denied. I'm not aware of anyone whose claim has been accepted.
Really? Oh my
Yes.
goodness! Wow.
Yes. And the reason is there are legal issues, but I think the reason is that because this touches everyone,
Yep.
if you compromise on one, you got to compromise
It's
on
setting
all,
a precedent,
right?
isn't it? Absolutely, and the people will go to that. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so the insurers have, if you start compromising on small businesses, then you're going to get the Boeings and the Googles and the
Yep.
right. They're going to start coming in and saying, well, so it really is a case that I think the insurers are going to fight this tooth and nail, and they're just going to. Now, that's not a lot of solace for a small business, but the only thing that's really that really they need to worry about in terms of coverage is the statute of limitations, right? You get your denial, you make your claim, and just make it, okay? Don't worry about it. Just make it. Put your stake in the ground under that policy, because I can guarantee you going forward, there's probably going to be an exclusion for COVID-19. It's not like you're going to get, not like, oh, I'm going to get better coverage next year for the pandemic than I already had. That's not realistic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So make your claim, put your stake in the ground, and then when you get that denial, and you probably will, that starts the statute of limitations running. Sometimes, it varies by state, but it's usually around 4 years for an insurance claim. But be careful in your policy. They could have limited it even further. I've seen policies where it's only 12 months.
Wow. Okay. That's
so
good
a lot
advice.
of people don't realize that, and then they say, well, we'll just wait and see because the statute of limitations is 4 years. Maybe they've asked their brother-in-law, hey, do you know what the statute of limitations is? And they'll say, yeah, it's 4 years. Okay. But the policy, be careful. There's limitations sometimes in your policy, but that's really the only thing that is really preventing you or forcing your hand. You can sit back right now, and you can wait and see what happens. Let perhaps the bigger policyholders sort it out. You start getting some good court decisions start coming out, some rulings start coming out, and then all of a sudden you can see a shift. Legislatures may be acting as well on behalf of policyholders. So, make your claim. The only way that you'll be 100% sure you won't recover is if you don't make the claim.
That's true. Oh my goodness, this is great advice, Alex. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we come to the end of the segment, but I mean, all of the stuff that you just talked about is common sense, but also when there's a lot of confusion going on, sometimes you don't see the clear path. And you just gave some really great advice. So, Alex, thank you for joining me this morning. And, I'm going to put your details on the website because we'll be doing the article. We'll be publicizing this. So I'm sure you may get some email questions, but that's what it's all about, isn't it? Is we want you to help if you can. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for giving me the time.
No, it's been brilliant. It really has. I've learned a lot as well. Thank you. Well, that was Alex Roje, of course, from Lathrop GPM. And that was a great conversation because at the end of the day, guys, as we've been talking about for the past few months, when we start to see the wave of everything coming over and seeing, what could be happening, planning, I think, is the underlining thing here. We've got to have planning. If you're in the middle of this now, then there are people out there to help you, just like Alex over at Lathrop GPM, and pick up the phone. I'll put all the information on the website. But let's start looking forward. We're running a campaign called Now is the Time. Hashtag Now is the Time. And I'm putting out a lot of information out on that, etc. We're helping businesses as much as we can, help with their lead generation, etc. But planning, operations is just as important as your marketing. Because at the end of the day, if you can't run your business, you've got nothing to sell. So let's start looking at that. It was great to have Alex on the show today. And as I always end my show, go out there, make some money, but have some fun. See ya. Bye-bye.